The first knock. The house sat alone at the end of an unpaved road, half buried in the creeping wilds of pine and shadow. To most it looked abandoned, just another forgotten place swallowed by time. But every night the lights turned on. Every morning the mailbox was checked, because someone lived there, alone. His name was Thomas Gray, 56 years old, retired mechanic, recently divorced, and as he put it, quietly rotting in peace. That peace broke on a Thursday. It was a still night, the kind where the wind doesn't move, and the air feels too thick, like it's holding its breath. Thomas sat in his kitchen, hunched over a bowl of instant noodles, letting the glow of the stove light bathe the room in yellow. The only sounds were the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. Then he heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 soft raps. Not at the front door, but the back, the one that opened out to the woods. He froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. He wasn't expecting anyone. He lived so far off the main road that even deliveries called ahead. And no sane person used the back door. Probably a tree limb, he muttered to himself, trying to sound convinced. Still, he set the spoon down and stood. The back door had no porch light, just a dusty glass pane that gave a view of blackness and your own reflection if the lights were on behind you, which they were. He approached slowly, footsteps careful. When he reached the door, he flicked off the kitchen light. Now he could see outside. Nothing, no one. He stood there for a while, peering into the dark, almost hoping for an animal or a person to be there. Anything that could give this a normal explanation. Nothing moved. No footprints in the dirt. No rustling. Just the distant sound of crickets and the steady drum of his own heartbeat. He locked the deadbolt and went back to his dinner. Friday night, 11:42 p.m. Thomas had nearly forgotten the incident. But again, knock, knock, knock. 3 times, soft, deliberate, again from the back door. He was in the living room this time, watching an old Western, half asleep. The sound jolted him fully awake. His dog Daisy, a lumbering German Shepherd mix, didn't bark, but she did something worse. She growled. Low and continuous, her body tense, fur prickling like bristles. "Who's out there?" Thomas called, voice gruff. No answer. This time he grabbed a flashlight and his old baseball bat. With Daisy glued to his side, he walked to the back door again, turned off the lights, stared out into the black. Still nothing. But this time he opened the door. The flashlight beam sliced across the yard, catching tree trunks, patches of wild grass, a rusted rake leaning against the fence. No movement, no footprints, not even the sound of retreating steps. He scanned the edges of the woods, even pointed the light up into the trees. Nothing. He stayed up late that night, sat by the door with the bat across his lap, but the knocking didn't come again. Saturday, he installed a motion sensor floodlight above the back door. It triggered once in the afternoon, squirrel probably, and never again that day. But when the clock crept past 11:40 p.m., Thomas felt the tension return. He sat in the kitchen this time, staring at the door, floodlight armed, Daisy at his feet. 11:45, nothing. 11:50, he held his breath. And then, never one in my one, knock now, knock, knock, knock. Same soft rhythm, 3 spaced out taps. The light didn't turn on. That's what sent a chill down his spine. The sensor hadn't triggered. Either someone stood too far away, or the system failed, or something was there and didn't set it off at all. Daisy whimpered. Thomas stood more angry than afraid now. He flung the door open, wide, baseball bat in hand, flashlight pointed into the black. Still no movement. But now there were marks. Not footprints exactly, just indentations in the dirt, like someone had stood there barefoot for a long time. 5 toes, bare heel. And more disturbing, the footprints were facing the door. Thomas stepped out into the cold air, scanned the woods, his heart a drumbeat in his ears. "Show yourself," he barked. Silence. Then something moved. Not in front of him, but behind. He spun around, bat raised. Nothing. The door was still open, the kitchen empty. But the hairs on his arms stood straight. He backed inside, shut the door, bolted it, and locked the inner chain for good measure. The rest of the night was silent. By Monday, Thomas hadn't slept in 2 days. He called the local sheriff's office, but they brushed it off as paranoia. Kids playing pranks, the deputy said. Happens more than you think. But this ain't Halloween, Thomas snapped. The deputy shrugged. Maybe early birds. That night, Thomas sat in front of the back door again. Flashlight beside him, Daisy curled up but watchful. 11:30. Silence. 11:45. Nothing. Midnight. He exhaled almost in relief. And then knock, knock, knock. Same rhythm, same sound. 3 knocks, as if right next to his ear. But this time they came from the window. He turned sharply. The kitchen window above the sink looked out to the side yard. The knocking had definitely come from there. He rushed to it, yanked up the curtain. No one. But the outside pane of the glass was fogged like someone had leaned in close and breathed on it. And written in the condensation were 3 words. Let me in. Thomas stumbled back, heart racing. Daisy began barking now, furious, wild, the kind of bark that said she sensed something he couldn't. Thomas turned every light on in the house, armed himself with not just a bat, but his old hunting knife. He didn't sleep that night. He didn't even sit down. Tuesday morning, he visited his neighbor, old Miss Carraway, who lived half a mile down the road. She was 82, blind in one eye and deeply superstitious. When he told her about the knocking, the window, and the footprints, she grew quiet. Too quiet. Then she said, "You never answered, did you?" Thomas blinked. "No, why?" Miss Carraway leaned in close. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "She only knocks 3 times, every night. Back door first, then the side, then the front. Each time she gets closer, you answer and she gets in. And if she gets in," she paused, "you don't leave." Thomas tried to laugh it off, but her words followed him all the way home. That night, he unplugged the fridge, the microwave, every buzzing device. He sat in total silence. Daisy wouldn't stop pacing. 11:43. Nothing. 11:47. He clenched his fists. Midnight. Silence. And then, a knock knock, knock, from the front door, the final location. Thomas didn't move. He sat in the kitchen staring straight ahead, trying not to breathe, trying not to blink. The knocking stopped. Then came the whisper right outside the front door. "Tommy, I know you're awake. Rule of 3. Thomas didn't open the front door. He didn't breathe. He didn't blink. The whisper outside Tommy, "I know you're awake," lingered in the air like smoke, thin, unnatural, almost sweet. Then silence. Not even the wind stirred the trees. Daisy didn't bark this time. She whimpered and crawled under the table, something she hadn't done since thunderstorms scared her as a puppy. Thomas sat frozen in the kitchen chair, clutching his flashlight like a lifeline. He stared at the wall until the first orange glow of dawn began to bleed through the windows. Only then did he stand. Only then did he check the front door. No one, no marks, no writing in the dew, no footprints. It was like nothing had ever happened. But Thomas knew. He remembered what Miss Carraway said. She knocks 3 times, back door, side window, front door. Each time she gets closer. She hadn't knocked randomly. She had followed a pattern, a rule. And he was now on the 3rd night. Thomas barely slept that day. When he did, it was shallow, full of twitchy dreams and whispers just below hearing. By evening, he was jumpy. Every creak in the house made him flinch. Every shadow seemed too still. He taped cardboard over the windows, turned off all the lights, stacked furniture against the doors, not just the front and back, but even the basement one. By 11:30, he was seated in the hallway between the kitchen and living room, armed with a flashlight, 2 knives, and a mug of black coffee that trembled in his hand. The clock ticked louder than usual. 11:41, 11:42, and then right on time, knock, knock, knock. 3 soft raps. At the back door again. He didn't move, didn't breathe. 30 seconds later, knock, 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 from the side window. And finally, knock, 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 at the front door, exactly like before. 3 locations, 3 knocks each, always in the same order, always at the same time. Thomas tried to ignore the rising dread clawing at his chest. She was following a pattern, but this time she didn't whisper. This time she scratched. It began as a faint dragging sound. Then claws, he was sure they were claws, scraped across the wood outside the door. Then across the walls, then along the windows, circling the house. She was testing him, testing the boundaries. At 3:07 a.m., everything stopped. No scratching, no knocking, not even the usual forest sounds outside. Thomas didn't move until sunrise. When light finally came, he went outside with his phone camera, hoping to record some proof. The back door had 3 long scratches across it, deep, splintered. So did the siding near the kitchen window and the porch. But what made his stomach twist was the wooden welcome sign beside his door. He hadn't touched it in months. It was sun-faded and cracked. Now it was different. The word welcome had been scratched out, replaced by 3 deep lines underneath. Not words, just symbols. But they almost looked like tally marks. 1, 2, 3. He brought the footage to the sheriff's office again. This time the deputy took one look at the scratches and raised an eyebrow. "Big raccoon," he joked. Thomas didn't laugh. "I need someone to come out," he said. "I need a patrol car parked outside just one night." The deputy hesitated. "Look, Mr. Gray, even if we sent someone, they'd probably say the same thing. You live out by the tree line. You know how these woods sound at night." "She's real," Thomas growled. "Who?" He didn't answer, just turned and walked out. That afternoon, he called Miss Carraway again. She answered on the first ring. "She came back, didn't she?" the old woman asked. "I never opened the door," he said, "but she's still knocking, every night." "You're in it now, Thomas," she replied, her voice soft. "You didn't let her in, but now she knows you hear her. That's enough." "What does she want?" Miss Carraway went silent. Then she said something that chilled him more than the knocks. "She wants to be remembered." Thomas frowned. "What does that mean?" But she had already hung up. That night he stayed outside. Armed with a hunting rifle and sitting under the floodlight, Thomas waited by the back steps, determined to see her with his own eyes. If she was real, if she wasn't just some half-formed delusion born of stress and insomnia, he would see her, catch her, end it. He sat for over 2 hours. Daisy refused to join him. She stayed inside, scratching at the door, whining. Then right on schedule. Knock, knock, knock. On the back door. Only Thomas was sitting right there, not 2 feet away. He hadn't seen or heard a thing approaching, but the knocks were real. He turned the flashlight toward the door, empty. Swung it toward the woods, nothing. Then slowly the floodlight flickered and went out. Darkness swallowed the yard, and that's when he saw her. A woman standing just beyond the tree line, dressed in white, motionless. Her hair hung like curtains around her face, and she was barefoot. He couldn't see her eyes, but he could feel her watching. He raised the rifle. "Say something," he barked. "Come closer." She didn't move. Then she did. 1 step, and the sound of her bare foot in the leaves was louder than it should have been, like a crash in the silence. 2 steps. Closer, just at the edge of the light's reach. Then Fornidormaren would non-thinning. 3 steps. And now she was clear enough to see. Her dress was old, torn, soaked at the bottom like she'd walked through water. Her mouth moved, but he heard nothing. And then she smiled. The flashlight died in his hand. Total darkness. Thomas backed up the steps, heart pounding, nearly tripping on the threshold as he fell inside and slammed the door shut. Nothing followed him, but through the window he heard it. Knock, knock, knock. The next morning he didn't go outside. He packed, threw clothes-canned food and Daisy's leash into a duffel bag, grabbed keys, planned to drive until he ran out of gas or stayed. But when he opened the front door, something stopped him cold. On his porch, arranged in neat rows, were 3 dead birds. No blood, no damage, just dead. Next to them, a note. Yellow paper, handwritten in faded ink. It read, "We're no in Babonsum. Leaving won't help. I know your name now." He dropped the note, slammed the door, and locked every bolt he had. That night, he didn't prepare. He didn't stay by the door. He didn't check the windows. He pretended not to hear. He locked himself in the closet, wrapped himself in a blanket, and covered his ears like a child hiding from monsters. But still, knock, 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 back door, knock, 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 side window, knock, 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 front door. He whispered to himself, don't answer, don't answer, don't. Then came the whisper again. Only this time it wasn't from outside. It was inside the house. Tommy, his flashlight flickered on in the closet. Its beam caught the far wall. 3 words had been scratched into the paint. You heard me. Footprints in the dew. Thomas Gray had always believed in what he could see, fix, or dismantle. Carburetors, circuit boards, pipes and pressure gauges. Things that worked logically. Things that could be repaired when broken. But nothing made sense anymore. 3 nights of knocking, 3 times per night, 3 locations. Always the same order, always the same hour. And now she wasn't just at the door. She was inside the house. That whisper in the closet still echoed through his mind. You heard me? He hadn't opened the door. He hadn't invited her in. But something had changed. She knew his name. She'd left him a message. And now she was in. Thomas hadn't left the closet until the sun poured through the cracks in the door. Even then, his legs were stiff, his body shaking from cold and fear. Daisy had whined and scratched at the outside of the door for nearly an hour before he emerged. He checked the house. All doors were locked. All windows closed. But the air had changed. He could feel it thicker, heavier. Like someone had been breathing in every room, like someone was still watching. He found no intruder, but something found him. At 9:07 a.m., Thomas made coffee with trembling hands. He barely drank it. Outside, a thin mist hugged the woods. Dew glittered on the grass like glass powder. Something urged him to look. He opened the back door slowly. It creaked the way old doors do when they know you're scared. His eyes scanned the yard, just the usual shapes, the rusting lawnmower, fallen branches, a tipped-over bucket. But then he saw them. Footprints. Bare, human, damp. They started at the back door, not led toward it, but away from it. Each step glistened with moisture, as if whoever had left them was dripping wet. But the surrounding ground was dry. They crossed the yard silently, stepping over rocks, around debris, even curving around a small patch of thistle, like someone conscious had walked them, purposefully. They led straight into the woods, and then they vanished. No broken twigs, no more impressions, no signs of return. It was as if someone had stepped out of his house, walked into the forest barefoot, and disappeared into the earth. Thomas stood at the edge of the tree line, staring into the shadows. He didn't follow. Inside, he reviewed the footage from his front porch camera. There was nothing, no movement, no figure. But the door creaked on camera. The knocking was captured, soft but clear. The motion sensor hadn't triggered, and at exactly 12:03 a.m., the feed glitched for 6 seconds. When it returned, the timestamp read 12:06. The door was closed, and the small ceramic cat statue beside it had fallen on its side. Thomas hadn't touched that statue in weeks. That evening, he spoke aloud in the kitchen for the first time since it all began. "I don't know what you want," he said to the empty air. "But I didn't ask for this. I didn't invite you." No answer. He stared at the back door. "Leave." Still nothing. He turned off every light, unplugged every appliance, and sat in silence as the minutes ticked down. 11:30. Daisy whimpered, curled into the laundry basket, and refused to leave it. 11:43. He sat in his armchair, staring at the front door. This time he would not flinch. He would not move. 11:45. Silence. No knocking. He blinked in confusion, checked his phone. 11:48. Still nothing. Midnight. Nothing. Then tiniramantanrititi. Drip. He looked up. Drip. A faint wet sound from the hallway. He stood, walked slowly toward the noise. And there in the dim light of the hall he saw them. Wet footprints, leading from the back door, through the hallway, past the bathroom, toward the basement. They were fresh, as if someone had just walked through. But the floor around them was dry. The basement door was slightly ajar. He hadn't opened it. He hadn't touched that door in over a year. Thomas stood at the top of the stairs, flashlight shaking in his hand. "Get out of my house," he whispered. The silence was heavy. And then, the basement steps, one single creak. Something had just stepped onto them. Thomas backed away and shut the door. But just before the latch clicked, a cold draft rushed up from below. Sharp, damp, like the smell of a flooded grave. He sealed it shut, jammed it with a chair, and slept, if you could call it that, with his back against the bedroom wall, clutching Daisy and a crucifix he hadn't touched since childhood. The next day, he found more footprints. They now led into the kitchen, to the fridge, and to the sink. He ran his fingers along the edge of the counter. Wet. Something had touched it. Something was living in the house now. Desperate, Thomas drove into town, seeking anyone who might know what to do. He went back to Miss Carraway. She met him at the door with wide eyes. "I told you not to answer," she hissed. "I didn't. I swear I never opened the door." She shook her head. "You heard her. That's enough. That's the rule. That's how it spreads." He frowned. "What do you mean, spreads?" She opened a drawer and handed him a folded page, yellowed and torn from an old journal. Handwritten. At the top were 4 words, the rule of 3. He read silently. "She knocks 3 times for 3 nights. First to be noticed, second to be feared, third to be remembered. Once remembered, she stays. She enters not through doors, but through attention, through fear, through knowing. To hear her is to invite her. To speak her name is to anchor her. And once you do, she leaves footprints behind." The final line chilled him. "Do not follow the footprints. They lead only downward." Miss Carraway pointed at the page. "You've already seen them, haven't you? The footprints." He nodded slowly. "She's anchored now," the old woman whispered. "She's inside." Thomas returned home at dusk, the sun fading behind the treetops. The house felt colder, dimmer. He could hear the soft hum of static in his ears, though none of his devices were on. The footprints had dried, but new ones had appeared. This time they led from the basement door to the living room window. Just 2 sets of steps, in and then out. But he never saw anyone leave. He watched the footage again. Same glitch at 12:03 a.m., same silence, same faint dripping sound just before the power flickered. And then, a frame, barely a frame, but paused and zoomed in, he could see it. A woman, pale face, dark wet hair, half hidden behind the curtain near the kitchen. Eyes open, mouth closed, hands pressed flat to the wall. And she was looking straight at the camera. That night, Thomas didn't wait for the knocks. He sat on the porch with his rifle across his lap, staring into the woods. If she came, he'd face her. But she never knocked. Not once. Instead, at 2:17 a.m., he heard something worse. Water. Rushing, gurgling. It came from beneath the porch then, from under the floorboard, like something was moving underneath. He grabbed the flashlight, stepped inside, and followed the noise to the hallway. The basement door was open. The footprints were back, fresh, shiny, leading downward. He stood at the top of the stairs. A voice called up from the darkness. "Tommy, don't be afraid. You already let me in." Then, urine, splash, like someone stepping into standing water. Thomas didn't go down. He shut the door, nailed it shut this time. But when he turned around, more footprints. Not just 1 set. 2. 1 set small, child-sized. The other adult, bare, female. They both walked across his floor, one in front of the other. And both were still wet. Don't look her in the eyes. The footprints wouldn't dry. Thomas wiped them again with an old towel once, twice. But the marks only reappeared minutes later. Wet, bare, and side by side. One large, one small. One sat childlike, as if left by someone no older than 7. He stared at them trembling. He didn't have children, never did. Who was the second set from? Daisy wouldn't enter the room anymore. She sat at the edge of the hallway, growling, ears flat, tail rigid. When he stepped too close to the prince, she whimpered and backed away. Thomas didn't sleep. He spent the night watching the doors, the windows, the camera feeds. And around 2:58 a.m., just before the daily glitch, he saw her again. The woman, standing at the edge of the backyard, this time closer than ever before. Still in white, still dripping, still motionless. But this time she wasn't alone. A small figure stood next to her, just barely the height of her hip. No detail, just a silhouette, like a child-shaped shadow that hadn't fully formed. Then the footage glitched. When it came back, they were both gone. By morning, Thomas was hollow-eyed and shivering. He called Miss Carraway again. No answer. He called the sheriff's office again. No help. And then just before noon, someone knocked at the front door. Just one knock. Thomas jumped, heart jackhammering. He peeked through the peephole. Not her. It was an old man, wiry, with sunburned skin and yellow eyes, dressed in flannel and worn boots. He held a paper bag in one hand and looked up at the door without knocking again. Thomas cracked the door slightly. "You Thomas Gray?" the man asked, voice like sandpaper. "Yes." The old man glanced around. "I'm Walter. I live 2 lots down the road. Heard about what's been happening." Thomas hesitated. "Did Miss Carraway send you?" Walter nodded once. "She's not doing well. Had a spell last night. She wanted you to have this." He handed Thomas the paper bag. Inside, a small mason jar filled with black salt, a tiny mirror, and a handwritten note folded 4 times over. Walter didn't wait for thanks. Before Thomas could ask anything, the old man fixed him with a hard stare and said, "Whatever you do, don't answer if she knocks. Don't speak to her. Don't even look her in the eyes." Thomas frowned. "Why the eyes?" Walter shifted uncomfortably. "That's how she gets in deeper. Through the looking, through the knowing. The more you see, the more she sees. And the mirror, to be known on outward. To reflect her back," Walter said, tapping his temple. "So she stays out here." Then he stepped off the porch. "You let her in once. Don't do it again." Thomas spent the rest of the day preparing. He sprinkled the black salt at every doorway, every window, lined the basement entrance twice over, taped the tiny mirror above the back door just beneath the motion sensor. Then he waited. Night fell quickly, and the dark that came with it felt different, thicker, too quiet. Even the crickets were silent. By 11:30, Daisy had hidden under the bed. By 11:44, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Then at 11:46, it began again. Knock, knock, knock. Back door. He didn't move. Knock, tongue, knock, tongue, knock. Side window. He squeezed his eyes shut. Knock, knock, knock. Front door. Then silence, until tap, a soft touch, right on the window next to him. He hadn't heard her move. He hadn't seen her come closer. But now, she was there. He turned slightly, slowly. His breath hitched. She was right outside the window, face nearly pressed to the glass eyes, wide, unblinking, white dress soaked and sticking to her frame. But the mirror, he remembered. Without facing her fully, he held it up slowly. Her reflection stared back, and then she smiled. Her mouth opened impossibly wide, and in that moment, though he only caught a glimpse, he saw her eyes. Black, endless, moving like water, not angry, not empty, hungry. And the moment their gazes met, every light in the house died. Darkness consumed everything. His skin turned cold, his limbs locked. Behind him, footsteps bare and slow inside the house. But there'd been no door opening, no window broken. Just her, inside. "Don't look," he whispered to himself. "Don't look, don't." "Tommy." The voice came from behind. He squeezed the mirror in his palm, raised it slightly, and turned it toward the hallway. The reflection caught a glimpse, Not just her, but the child. Closer now. Face twisted, skin too smooth, eyes missing, mouth open in a silent scream. Thomas turned away trembling. Not real, he whispered. You're not real. But they were. Morning came like a mercy. When the sun rose, the lights flickered back on, and the footprints were back, trailing now into the bedroom. They stopped at the foot of the bed, and there, scratched into the wood floor. You saw me. I saw you. That afternoon, Walter returned. He didn't need an invitation. He walked right in. You looked, didn't you? He said. Thomas didn't answer. I saw it in your face, Walter continued. She's deeper now. The more of her you see, the more of you she takes. Thomas leaned forward. What is she? Walter hesitated, then spoke low. She's not a ghost. Ghosts are memories, echoes. She's something older, something that mimics sorrow. She knocks because it's a test, an invitation. She used to be flesh, a long, long time ago. A person, a mother, Walter said quietly. One who lost her child in water, drowned, some say. Others say worse. She went mad looking, started knocking at houses, begging strangers to let her in. But now she doesn't ask. She latches on. Anyone who hears her, she wants a child, Thomas realized. Walter nodded. And if she can't have hers, she'll take yours. I don't have a kid. You do now, Walter said darkly. She brings one with her, a shadow, a replacement. That night, Thomas boarded the doors, turned on every light, played loud music to drown out the knocking. It didn't work. 11:47 p.m. Knock, knock, knock. This time it didn't stop. She knocked again, and again, and again. The sound came from all sides. Ceiling, floorboards, walls. The entire house shuddered with each knock. Then a lullaby, a gentle hum, coming from the bedroom. A woman's voice, low, off-key, and something joined in. A child's voice, humming along. Thomas couldn't breathe. He ran to the bedroom. The crib he didn't own a crib was in the corner, and inside a shadowy shape twisted under a sheet. Tiny, curling, breathing. When he blinked, it was gone. But the mobile hanging above it kept spinning. In the hallway mirror, she stood behind him. Thomas raised the salt, flung it toward the image, and her reflection hissed, mouth open in rage, then vanished in smoke. He fell to the floor and carved one message into the wood beside him. Don't look. The whisper behind the door. By the fifth night, Thomas no longer tried to convince himself that this could be explained. There was no raccoon, no branch brushing glass, no malfunctioning motion light. There was no helpful deputy, no helpful neighbor except Walter, who came and went like smoke, and no help at all from God, it seemed. She was real, and worse, she wasn't alone. Every night the knocking returned. Every night the footprints spread deeper into the house. Every night her reflection appeared behind windows, inside mirrors, under the television's sleeping glow. The child figure remained just as unsettling, there and not there. Watching, breathing, almost forming. But he hadn't opened the door. He hadn't let her in. So why was she still coming? That's what haunted him more than anything. He needed to understand. On the fifth night, Thomas set up a camera. He chose the best one. He had a night vision home security model he used to use for checking on Daisy when she was younger. It recorded sound, motion, and time-stamped every moment to the second. He placed it facing the back door, where the pattern always began. He taped a second mirror just like the first above the door frame. Checked the salt barrier. Reapplied the symbols Walter had etched into the door with a nail, 3 straight lines crossed once at the base. Thomas set the camera's feed to display live on his phone. He sat at the kitchen table, lights off, bat across his lap, and waited. Daisy didn't come out from under the bed all night. 11:45 p.m. No wind, no sound. Just Thomas breathing and the soft red light blinking on the camera. 11:46, still nothing. 11:47, knock, knock, knock. He jumped but didn't move from the chair. The knocks were softer this time, almost hesitant. He checked his phone. The camera had caught it. 3 sudden motions each time the door shook slightly in the frame. Then the microphone picked something up. A whisper. He leaned in, turned the volume all the way up. At first nothing, just static. Then so faint he had to play it 5 times before believing it. "Tommy, man, please, it's cold out here." The voice wasn't hers. Not the deep, watery one he'd heard before. This was different. Small. A child's voice. He froze, hit replay. The whisper was exactly the same. "Tommy, please. It's cold out here." Then 5 seconds of silence. And then scratching. Low, slow, just beneath the doorknob. Something trying the lock. His blood went cold. He gripped the bat tighter. Walked slowly to the door. Didn't open it. Didn't even touch it. But he crouched beside it. The camera still blinked. From the other side, soft breathing. He whispered, "Who are you?" No answer. Then Mondireen, "Don't you remember me?" Thomas's heart slammed against his chest. He stood up sharply and backed away from the door. The whisper continued, soft and pleading. "You said I could come in, you promised." He hadn't. He never had. But the voice was so convincing, so fragile. For one terrifying second, Thomas's hand reached for the lock and stopped. "No," he said aloud. "I don't know you." The whisper stopped. Silence returned. The camera blinked once. And the mirror above the door cracked down the metal. Morning brought more footprints. This time, they were on the ceiling. He stared up in disbelief. They were small, child-sized, wet. They started above the kitchen table and led down the hallway ceiling toward the bedroom. He didn't follow them. He burned sage, reapplied salt, read through Miss Carraway's journal fragments again and again. One page stood out more now than ever before. She sends the child first. The child knocks for her. The child is the invitation. She waits behind the door until you listen to the child. The child will wear your voice. The child will know your name. The child is not yours until it is. That evening, Walter returned without knocking. He handed Thomas a small cloth bundle. Inside, a small charm made from braided thread and a shard of reflective obsidian. "Hang it above your bedroom door," Walter said. "She's trying to trick you now." Thomas nodded, the child's voice. "It's not real, right?" Walter's face went hard. "Real enough to take you. Real enough to open the door if you're weak." "I didn't open it." "No, but you spoke back. That's the next stage." Thomas frowned. "What happens if I keep speaking?" Walter hesitated. "She'll knock once, then never stop. And when you open the door, it won't be her standing there." That night, Thomas put up the charm. He taped fresh black salt over every window, lined the back door with iron nails, hung every mirror facing outward, and then he turned the camera toward the hallway, this time facing his bedroom door. Because now he wasn't just afraid of the door outside. He was afraid of what was already inside. 11:46 p.m. No knocking. 11:47. He stared at the feet on his phone. Silence. And then a whisper right beside his ear. "She's not coming tonight." Thomas turned sharply. No one there. He looked down at the phone. The camera feed had glitched again at exactly 12:03 a.m. He hit rewind. At 12:01:13, the hallway appeared empty. At 12:01:14, a child-shaped shadow stood in the center. No footsteps, no fade in. Just there. The shape turned. Faceless, still, watching the camera. And then in the next frame it pointed. Straight at the lens. Straight at Thomas. He dropped the phone, backed away. The lights flickered. He didn't need a feed to know something was moving down the hall. Tap, 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 tap. Not knocking, fingernails. Dragging down the wall outside his room. Then, "Tommy, please, you promised." He gripped the bat, backed against the bed. The whisper wasn't at the door now, it was inside the room. Then the closet door creaked open, and standing there was the child. No face, no shadow, just a wet space in the air, shaped like a boy, and where its face should have been was his own. Thomas screamed. Through the bat, and it passed right through. The figure vanished like steam. The whisper lingered a moment longer. I just wanted to come home. He didn't sleep. When daylight returned, he rewatched the footage again and again. The shape didn't show up on the recording, but the sound did. The whisper, the same childlike voice. Tommy, please, you promised. But this time, at the end, barely audible, like it was right against the mic. She's behind you. The woman in white. It had become a ritual now. Wake at dusk, check the mirrors, reapply the salt review, the footage. But nothing prepared Thomas for what he saw on the sixth night's recording. He hadn't even noticed it when it happened. No sound, no whisper. Just the usual flicker of the lights and the pressure in the air that told him she was near. But the footage told a different story. At 12:03 a.m., the hallway camera glitched for a second. At 12:04:12, something appeared. He paused the video. There, standing in the far end of the hallway, a woman in white, so pale she seemed to glow even in night vision. Her dress hung like a curtain soaked in fog, clinging to her legs. Her hair was dark wet, matted down the sides of her face. No shoes, no movement. She was just standing there, facing the camera, not moving, not blinking. He hit play. She stayed motionless for 12 full seconds. No breathing, no shifting of weight. Then the screen flickered once. When the feed returned, she was gone. He rewound, paused, zoomed in. Her face was the worst part. It wasn't disfigured, it wasn't even grotesque. It was empty. A kind of sorrow so pure it burned. Eyes black but glistening, not pit's pools. And her mouth slightly open as if stuck between a word and a scream. Thomas blinked, and when he opened his eyes, the image on screen was different. She was no longer in the hallway. She was standing in his living room. He hadn't touched the remote. He hadn't changed the video. But the image had shifted, as if the footage had rearranged itself while he looked away. And there she was, closer. He turned off the monitor. It didn't matter how, or why, or what camera had caught her. She was moving without moving, traveling by being seen. The salt didn't stop her. The symbols didn't hold her. She wasn't obeying rules anymore. She was bending them. Thomas grabbed his hammer and nails and sealed shut the hallway door leading to the bedrooms. He slept in the kitchen with the lights on mirrors facing every entrance. And still sometime around 2 a.m., he awoke to find a reflection. Not in the mirror, but in the glass of the microwave door. Her face hovering behind his, watching. He blinked hard, and she was gone. He drove into town the next morning, ignoring the rising sunlight and the bone-deep exhaustion that clawed at him. Miss Carraway's house was closed. No car in the driveway, no lights, no answer. He tried Walter's place next, pounded the door. No one. A note was tacked to the wood paneling. Gone west, too close now. She followed the echo. That was all it said. Thomas cursed under his breath and returned home. Only then did he realize there were no birds, no wind, no rustling trees. The woods were silent. The whole world seemed to be holding its breath. That afternoon, he found something new on his front porch. A white dress, hung carefully over the railing, soaking wet. No tag, no note. But as he reached for it, the damp fabric seemed to twitch in the breeze, though the air was perfectly still. He didn't touch it, just stared. And beneath it on the porch wood, footprints, small, bare, child-sized, standing directly in front of the door, facing outward, as if something had stepped out of his house wearing her dress. That night, he didn't bother with the bat. He took the camera down. He unplugged the lights. He sat in silence, waiting. 11:46 p.m. No knocking. 11:47. No whisper. 12 Ronderod Apim. The microwave door clicked open. Not swung, not creaked. Just a perfect, deliberate click, as if someone opened it gently to reheat leftovers. Thomas didn't move. His phone still beside him lit up. Not a call, not a message. Just the camera app opening on its own. The feed showed the basement. He hadn't turned on the basement cam in over a week, but now it was live, showing something standing in the far corner, still white, watching. Thomas blinked, and she was gone. The floorboards creaked behind him. Not heavy. Light, careful. A child's step. He turned slowly. The hallway behind him was empty, but the mirror across from the fridge showed her. The woman in white, standing behind him, one hand reaching for his shoulder. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe, because somehow he knew if he blinked again, she'd be closer. He stared into the mirror until his eyes burned, but she didn't move, just stood, mouth open slightly, eyes locked on his, a storm of sorrow in human shape. And then he blinked. She was gone, but the door to the basement was now wide open. The salt line broken, the nails pulled out, and at the top step, a single wet footprint. He should have run, but he didn't. He walked to the door, gripped the frame, shined his flashlight down. The beam flickered, then caught on her face halfway down the stairs staring up at him. Not the woman, the child, standing there 1 foot lifted mid-step, eyes blank, mouth moving. No sound came out, but Thomas understood anyway. She's waiting below. He slammed the door and sealed it again, bolted it, nailed it, moved the refrigerator in front, but the whisper came anyway, this time from inside the walls. Tommy, or she just wants you to see her. Just once. She'll leave after. Lies. But the voice was his mother's. He fell asleep sometime near dawn, dreamed of water, of sinking, of hands gripping his ankles, pulling him into the dark. And when he awoke, he found something on the table, a photograph, old, curled at the edges. It showed a woman standing on the edge of a dock, holding a child, both staring out at the lake, and written on the back, I waited. He never came back. So I started knocking. Broken time. It was 11:43 p.m. when Thomas Gray noticed the ticking had stopped. The kitchen clock, the one that had been hanging above the sink for 13 years, froze in place. The second hand was stuck between ticks suspended mid-sweep, like it had forgotten how to move. He checked his phone. 11:43. But it didn't change. The screen dimmed, but the time remained static. He blinked. The digital clock on the microwave 11:43. The old watch on his wrist, mechanical manual wound immune to battery failure, also read 11:43. All of them stuck. The house had fallen into broken time. And outside the window, the trees no longer swayed. Not even a breeze passed through them. Stillness. Even the bugs had stopped buzzing. Thomas whispered aloud, she's close. Then, knock, knock, knock. From the front door, the microwave light flickered. Daisy, who had been hiding under the couch, whined but didn't move. Thomas stood up slowly. The air in the room felt denser, like walking through water. Every footstep echoed unnaturally, as if the house had grown hollow inside. He passed the living room mirror and paused. His reflection wasn't moving. He stopped heart pounding. He tilted his head. His reflection did nothing. He took a step back. Still nothing. Then in the mirror, his reflection smiled. Thomas staggered away from it, breath short. When he looked again, the mirror just showed him normal, wide-eyed, terrified. No smile, no delay. Just him. Another knock. This time on the bathroom door. It was open. And behind it, nothing. But the lights above the mirror flickered once, then burned out. The air grew colder. And in the darkness of the bathroom, the sound of dripping began again. Drip, drip, drip. But no water was on. Thomas stepped forward, flashlight in hand. He aimed the beam into the sink. Dry. Turned toward the tub. Empty. Then he lifted the light slowly toward the mirror. And she was there, standing behind him. Close, too close. The light flickered again, and in that split second she moved. A blur of white passed the corner of his eye. He turned, but the room was empty. 11:43 still. He ran to the kitchen. Every device still frozen. Even the camera screen showed a looping image, a single frame endlessly stuck, showing the hallway as it had looked nearly 10 minutes ago. But the hallway no longer looked like that. He could feel it. Something was there now. He crept to the edge of the hall and peered around the corner. The light overhead buzzed faintly. The bulb flickered. At the far end, the door to the bedroom stood ajar. He hadn't opened it. A breeze, icy cold, rolled toward him from the gap. He took a single step forward, and all the lights in the house shut off. Click, 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 like a heartbeat made of switches. Silence fell again, and in that silence, footsteps, coming up from the basement, one step at a time. Slow, rhythmic, measured. She wasn't rushing. She was enjoying it. Thomas backed into the kitchen and grabbed his phone. Still 11:43. No calls would go through. No messages would send. It was as if time had been suspended, frozen in the exact moment she chose to come in. He looked up and saw her shadow on the wall, stretched in long cast from a light source that no longer existed. It didn't move like a person. It slithered like water over broken glass. He remembered Walter's warning. When she breaks time, it means she's inside now. Not outside the doors, not in the walls, inside you. He grabbed the obsidian charm Walter had given him, still hanging above the pantry. Clutched it tight. He whispered, "You don't belong here." The shadow paused. Then it spoke. Not in words, but in thoughts. Pressed into his skull like hands against wet clay. "I was invited." Thomas gritted his teeth. "You tricked me." The house creaked all at once, every wall groaning, every pipe rattling. The shadow stretched across the floor, now long arms crawling toward him. The voice in his mind returned. "I waited in the cold. I knocked. And you heard me. You always hear me." He turned and ran toward the hallway again, past the stuck clock, past the flickering light. He burst into the bedroom and stopped cold. Every surface was covered in photographs. All of them spread across the bed, the floor pinned to the walls with sewing needles. Each one featured her, in different places, behind trees, in reflections, in crowds, always half hidden, always watching. But the worst were the ones in the house. She stood behind him in the kitchen, in the mirror of the bathroom, on the porch, in the yard. One showed her standing in the bedroom while he slept. And in every photo, the time displayed was 11:43. He backed away, stepping on a picture frame, shattering the glass beneath his heel. And behind him, a new sound. Something between a giggle and a gasp. The child. The not child. The thing pretending to be one. He turned slowly, and there it was. In the closet, peeking out, head cocked, smiling a smile far too wide for a child. Its skin was waxy now, unfinished, like it hadn't decided what face to wear. And then, like a puppet reacting to strings, it began walking toward him. Fast, jerky. Thomas stumbled backward, threw the obsidian shard at it. The moment the stone struck its chest, it screamed. Not a child's scream. Her scream. The lights exploded, and the photographs burst into flames. He collapsed in the hallway, chest heaving. The house was pulsing now. Lights stuttered on and off. The clocks ticked in bursts, then stopped again. Time trying to restart. Then, all the doors in the house opened at once. Every room, every closet, even the basement. And from every open frame came her whisper, overlapping, surrounding him. "Let me in. I'm so cold. I remember you. I saw you first. You heard me. We were supposed to go together. You promised." He clamped his hands over his ears, screamed no, and then the house fell silent. For 1 second, a single breath. Then a knock from inside the refrigerator. Thomas stared frozen. Another knock. He stepped closer, opened the door. Nothing except a single photograph of a boy, soaking wet, eyes shut, lips blue. The back read. He didn't answer, so I knocked again. And then the time on the microwave blinked once. 11:44. It had moved. Time had restarted, but something had changed. The air felt thinner, the pressure gone. Daisy emerged from under the couch, tentative, sniffing the air. Thomas stood in place, still shaking. The clocks were ticking again. Everything looked normal, and yet deep inside he knew it wasn't over. Time hadn't fixed itself. She had let it move. When he checked the hallway camera later, he found the feed was corrupted. Only a single second was saved. A still frame. And in it, Thomas could see himself in the hallway. And her standing in front of him, face to face. His eyes were open. Hers were gone. Just holes, blacker than night. And between them, the clock on the wall showed 11:43, frozen in that moment forever. Her voice in his head. Thomas no longer trusted silence. It wasn't peace, it wasn't calm. It was waiting. Waiting for her. Waiting for the voice. He'd been awake for 31 hours, pacing the length of his house like a prisoner counting bricks. Every reflection was covered. Every clock unplugged. He hadn't looked at a screen in over a day, not even his phone, because that's where she'd started whispering now. Through static, through glass, through him. But staying awake didn't help anymore. Because now she came in dreams. The first time it happened, he woke up screaming with blood in his ears. He didn't remember falling asleep. One moment he was staring at the salt line across the hallway, and the next he was back in the lake. The same cold water from his childhood. Fog covering the surface. Stillness pressing on his chest like stone. Except he wasn't alone. She was there. Not the shadow, not the child. Her, the woman in white, standing waist deep in the water, arms open, face hollow, eyes black and pouring. And when she opened her mouth, he heard her voice. Not in the dream, in his skull. You left him. You watched him sink. Thomas screamed awake, clutching his chest. His shirt was soaked with water. That morning, he threw every mirror out of the house. He smashed them all, dumped the shards in a trash bag, and drove 20 miles out of town to throw them in the river. It didn't help. By sunset, the whispers had returned. Not out loud. Inside. Like a hum that settled into his bones. Sometimes she sang. Other times she just repeated the same phrase over and over. You heard me. You heard me. You heard me. He stuffed his ears with cotton, blared music. But no matter how loud the world got, her voice was louder. He turned to the only pages that still made sense, Miss Carraway's journal. There in frantic handwriting were the lines he had once skimmed and dismissed. Now they rang with truth. She begins in dreams, but dreams are only the door. Next, she learns to echo in thought. If you hear her while waking, the threshold is crossed, and then you are no longer alone in your own mind. Thomas flipped the page. A list of symptoms was written in crooked lines. Voice in dreams. Thoughts not your own. Water in the lungs. Fog in the vision. Loss of hours. Repeating phrases. Seeing your face in her reflection. He paused on that last one. Seeing your face in her reflection. Later that night, he turned on the kitchen faucet to fill Daisy's bowl. The water gurgled, slowed, turned murky, and then just before he shut it off, he heard her humming through the pipe. The same lullaby as before. Low, off-key, endless. Thomas stared at the sink in horror, and in the thin layer of water at the bottom, a reflection shimmered. A face, not hers, his sworn, but smiling, and blinking on its own. He fled the house, drove for hours. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to get away. The voice followed anyway. In the car radio, in the wind through the window, in the hum of the tires. You were supposed to go with him. He called for you. You turned away. The memories she pressed into his skull weren't his, except part of them felt like his. The lake, the dock, the splash, the hand that slipped through his fingers, the boy that sank. He was too young to remember what happened that day. But maybe she wasn't lying. Maybe he had forgotten something he'd done. Or maybe she had planted a memory there. Like a seed. Growing. Feeding. By dawn, Thomas parked the car near a long-abandoned church on the county line. He sat on the steps trembling, Daisy curled beside him, equally drained. And then a woman approached. Real. Solid. Not a ghost. An old woman with white hair in a bun and fire behind her eyes. You're him, she said. Thomas stood up confused. I'm sorry. You're the one the house picked. The house? Sorry, she nodded. The one on Pine Ridge, with the black door. I used to live there, until she made me leave. He stared stunned. You saw her, she said, didn't you? Thomas nodded slowly. The woman's face softened. Then I'll give you one warning. Because no one ever gave me one, she's not hunting you. She's becoming you. What? She enters through the knock, but she stays through thought. And when she's loud enough to finish your sentences, the woman stepped back. You won't be the one speaking anymore. That night, Thomas didn't go home. He stayed in a motel near the edge of town. Cheap, musty, silent. He kept every light on. Still, the voice followed. Not a whisper anymore. Not a hum. A conversation. He lay on the mattress, hands clutched to his temples, and she spoke in his head like they shared it now. You've seen what I lost. He gritted his teeth. Get out! He waited, I waited, but you forgot. You're not real, he hissed. You made me real. The night you listened. The night you looked. You pulled me through the door. I never opened it. You opened your mind. He screamed. Daisy barked and pressed against him, tail between her legs. And then the motel mirror cracked. All on its own. 11:43 p.m. The TV turned on. A blank channel. White noise. And in the middle of the static, her face, smiling, speaking, but only inside his head. When I finish remembering you, you'll finish becoming me. Thomas barely made it back to the house. He didn't remember driving. Didn't remember opening the door. Only that at some point he was standing in the kitchen again, barefoot soaked. Daisy whined at his feet. Every surface in the house had fogged. The windows, the floor tiles, even the screen of his phone fogged from the inside and traced in it over the glass. Let me speak. He found Walter's notebook in the cabinet beneath the floorboards where he'd hidden it weeks ago, hoping never to need it again. But now, trembling, he opened to the final section. There's no banishment, no exorcism. She's not a demon, she's sorrow. And sorrow can't be banished, only contained, only quieted. But if she enters your thoughts, you must speak only truth. Say what you did, say what you know, and then let go. That is the only voice louder than hers. Thomas set the journal down. He sat in the living room, lights off, Daisy curled beside him. And he waited. The house went silent. Even the floor stopped creaking. And then, then, she spoke. Inside his mind, inside every corner of himself. Tommy, Simon, he didn't respond. You heard me. His breath shook. You knew I was there. He closed his eyes. And this time, he answered, softly. I was 6 years old, he said aloud. I saw the boy fall in, and I ran. The voice paused. You left him. I was afraid. The house moaned, the walls trembled. The voice grew louder. You turned away. Tears filled Thomas's eyes. I forgot him, he whispered. And I've been forgetting ever since. Then silence. And for a moment he thought it had worked, until her voice returned. Stronger. Then remember. The night he answered. It was 11:42 p.m. when Thomas Gray stood in front of the back door. No more symbols etched in the wood. No salt. No cameras. No barriers. He had swept them all away. Not because he wanted to die. Not because he had given up. But because he had finally remembered. The memory hadn't returned all at once. It came in pieces, flashes, cracks in the surface of a lie he hadn't even realized he'd been telling himself for over 2 decades. A dock, a boy, laughter, a shove that was meant to be a joke, the splash, the silence that followed, then the turning away. He had forgotten, but she hadn't, and now it was almost midnight, and she was going to knock. And for the first time, he was going to answer. Thomas sat at the kitchen table with Daisy beside him, her head on his foot. She didn't tremble tonight, didn't hide under the bed. Somehow the dog understood this was an ending. In front of him sat the photograph, the one that had appeared weeks ago. The woman on the dock holding the child, water stretching out behind them like an unending shadow. She had waited, Not for vengeance, not for blood, for recognition. For the one who let her boy drown to face what he'd done. And now he would. 11:43 p.m. The clock stopped again. The lights dimmed. A single breeze stirred through the house, though every window was shut. And then, Nasenormen, Surdesurm. When knock, knock, knock. Thomas stood slowly, walked to the door, placed his hand on the knob. He didn't speak, didn't ask who it was, didn't ask her to go away. He simply turned the handle and opened the door. There was no porch, no grass, no night sky, only fog. And the lake. It shouldn't have been there, but it was. The lake from his childhood, still, cold, silver in the moonlight, dock jutting out into nothing. Thomas took a breath and stepped outside, but his house didn't follow. Behind him was only more fog. No walls, no ceiling, just mist and silence. He stepped forward again. The dock creaked beneath his feet, and waiting at the end, she stood there. The woman in white. She turned slowly as he approached, her face calm, unreadable. Behind her, the water rippled. And then he saw him, a child, floating just beneath the surface, face up, eyes closed, pale hands spread gently like wings. Not bloated, not decayed, just waiting, frozen in the moment he was lost. Thomas's knees gave out. He dropped to the dock, breath ragged. I remember now, he whispered. I remember what I did. The woman said nothing. She knelt beside him and reached out. He flinched, but she didn't touch him. She pointed to the water, to the boy. Her voice came not in his head this time, but aloud. Soft, clear, ancient. Say his name. Thomas's lips trembled. I don't know it. Her eyes black as the lake filled with something deeper than sorrow. Then go into the water and ask. He hesitated. The cold rippled toward the dock, curling around the posts. Daisy whined from somewhere behind the fog, but Thomas couldn't turn back. He stepped to the edge, removed his shoes, and walked into the water. It was ice, knives. Each step felt like his skin was splitting, but he kept walking. Until the lake reached his waist, his chest, his chin. And then, "It fronted a Tyrian," he sang. There was no struggle. The water accepted him, pulled him gently down like a mother cradling her child. And as he descended, the world around him shifted. No longer just water. Memories. Dozens. Hundreds. All playing out like film in reverse. Children laughing. Bikes by the dock. Voices shouting, "Be careful." And then, Wapitirin, the moment. Thomas, 6 years old, standing on the edge of the dock. The boy behind him, smaller, smiling. "You go first," the boy said. "No, you." Thomas laughed and gave him a shove. Playful, thoughtless. The boy stumbled, slipped. His head struck the side of the dock. Then silence. Thomas didn't scream, didn't reach. He just ran. The memory dissolved, and Thomas was back in the water, face to face with the child, eyes still closed, lips slightly parted. And then, Suridur, Termwayinda, they opened. "I forgive you." The voice wasn't angry, wasn't vengeful. It was tired. And then the boy began to rise, toward the surface, toward the dock. Thomas followed. When he broke the surface, the woman in white was gone. Only Daisy remained standing at the edge of the dock, tail wagging slowly. The fog was clearing. The lake shimmered under a breaking dawn. And beside Thomas, standing on the dock, was the boy. Dry, whole. Not a ghost, not a monster. Just a child. He looked up at Thomas and smiled, then turned and walked into the light. Thomas collapsed onto the dock, gasping. His body was warm, the air clean. His ears no longer rang with her voice. His mind was his own. And when he looked up, he saw his house again. Back in place. Real. The clocks inside all blinking 12:01. Time had resumed, and the nightmare was over. He never saw the woman again. The whispers stopped. The mirror reflections returned to normal, and the fog never rolled in like that again. But sometimes when the house is still and the wind moves across the back door, Thomas swears he hears it. Not a knock, but a whisper. Thank you. Now she knocks on yours. The house stood empty for weeks. Neighbors noticed. They didn't see Thomas anymore. Didn't hear Daisy barking. Didn't see his car come or go. The lights stopped turning on at night. The mailbox overflowed. But no one dared check inside. Those who lived nearby said the air around the place had changed. It hung thick and still like fog that never lifted. Even children stopped cutting across the yard. Birds stopped perching on the roof. The for sale sign appeared one morning, no realtor, no contact number. Just a wooden stake and red letters available. By the time a new family moved in, nobody really questioned it. People forget, that's what towns do. But they remembered one thing, even if they couldn't explain why. They never knocked. Not on the back door, not ever. 6 months later, in another neighborhood entirely hundreds of miles away, you move into a new house. It's nothing fancy, a bit old, needs some work, but it's affordable, quiet, close to town, has character. There's an old tree in the front yard, paint peeling on the porch. The back door is oddly heavy, a black metal handle cold to the touch. You tell yourself the strange scratches around the door frame are just wear and tear. You don't think about it again, not at first. The first night is normal. A few creaks, settling wood, pipes clanking, nothing unusual. You fall asleep easily, but at 3 a.m. you wake suddenly. Not from a noise, not exactly. Just a feeling, like something nudged you from sleep. You lie still listening, and then you hear it. Knock, knock, naraki. 3 soft taps from the back door. You sit up, wait. Maybe it was a branch, maybe the wind. You don't go check. You fall asleep eventually. The next day it bothers you. You stand at the back door in the morning, cup of coffee in hand, staring at the handle. The wood is scratched, not randomly concentrated around the lock. Almost as if someone had tried to open it repeatedly. You shake the thought. But that night it happens again. Same time, 3:10 a.m. Knock, 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 knock. You get up. This time you check. You look through the peephole. Nothing there. Just the yard, the trees. Still, you go back to bed. It keeps happening. Night after night. Always 3 knocks. Always the same door. You try to brush it off until the footprints start. Wet ones. From the back door, leading across the tile. Small, bare, child size. You check the locks. They're still bolted. No windows open. You try to tell yourself maybe you stepped in something. Maybe you made them. But the size, they're too small. And they go inward. Never outward. You bring it up once to a neighbor. She pauses, looking past you toward your house. Then she smiles too quickly. Old house creaks right. She doesn't bring it up again. A week later, you see her in the mirror. Not for long, just a flash. You're brushing your teeth and you see movement behind you. You spin, nothing there. But when you look back into the glass for a heartbeat, there she is, a woman in white, standing behind you, eyes dark as empty rooms, mouth open, as if trying to speak, then gone. You start to stay up, waiting, recording, but the camera never catches anything. You hear the knocks, but the camera hears nothing. You see the footprints, but the footage is clean. It's like she only exists when you look, when you listen, when you believe. Then the whispers begin, not loud, just behind you, just as you're falling asleep. I'm still waiting. Or, you heard me, didn't you? You sit up, turn on every light, nothing. But in the morning, your phone screen has fogged from the inside and traced in the mist. Let me in. Eventually you stop sleeping. You start noticing things. The clocks in your house, everyone pause at 3:00 a.m. for exactly 1 minute, every night. And during that minute, she walks. You hear the faint steps, see the doors creak open just a crack, see reflections that don't match your movements. She doesn't knock anymore. She's already inside. One night you find something you don't remember owning, an old photograph, left on your pillow. It shows a boy on a dock, A woman beside him, water behind them. You turn it over, nothing written on the back. But later that night you dream of a lake, still gray, fog rolling across it, and standing waist deep in the water, she opens her mouth. No sound, just her eyes, begging you to hear her. The next day you Google the address. Your house wasn't built recently. It was moved, relocated from another town, a town you've never heard of. You dig deeper. You find a forum thread from years ago. The title is, "Do Not Answer Her Knock." It's short, only a few posts. The original one describes exactly what you're experiencing. The knocks, the footprints, the woman in white. The last comment was left by someone named Tom G. It says, "If she's already knocking, it's too late, but you can still stop her from becoming you. Don't speak to her. Don't answer. Don't feel sorry. That's how she gets in. That's how she remembers. And when she remembers, she stays forever." You refresh the page. The post is gone, like it never existed. That night, you hear something new. A voice, not hers. A man's, right behind your ear. "She chose you." You spin. Nothing. Then your phone lights up. An audio file is playing one you didn't download. You press pause. It keeps playing. You try to delete it. It reappears. And all it plays on loop is her voice. "I waited. He forgot me. Don't forget me too." You tape the door shut. You seal the windows. You throw away every mirror. You unplug the clocks. You stay awake for days, but you're only delaying it. Because you've heard her voice now. Because she knows you believe. Because you opened the door, maybe not the real one, but the one that mattered. And one night, weeks later, you wake up in the dark. The lights won't turn on. The clocks won't tick. Time has stopped again. And from the hallway, knock, knock, knock. Not at the back door, not even at the front, from your bedroom closet. The voice follows. "You heard me." You turned away. "Now you remember me." You press yourself against the headboard, trembling, whispering, "I didn't do anything." But she answers soft as wind through leaves. "That's the problem. And maybe tomorrow you'll disappear too. Like Thomas, like others before you. But the knocking, it'll find a new house. Maybe your neighbors, maybe a friend's, maybe someone reading this. Because she never stops. She just waits and waits and waits until someone listens, until someone answers, until someone says, "Come in."